Thanks for joining us. For more great content like this, visit polishingthepulpit.com or search for Polishing the Pulpit in your favorite podcast app. Also, be sure to check out PTP 365 for thousands of more videos just like this. You can learn more by visiting 365.polishingthepulpit.com, and to make it easy for you, we've put a link in this video's description. Let's sing a song and study together.
When I was a kid, we had a pool in our backyard. And I remember one summer, my parents got me an inflatable raft to use on that pool. I adored that thing. I got pool noodles to use as my paddles, and I would pretend like I was going down the Amazon River or whitewater rafting, and I would play in that thing all the time. Until one day, I looked down and noticed there was a little bit of water coming in to that raft. I inspected it closer, and of course I found some holes, but they were tiny holes, so I wasn't too worried. In fact, I even kind of played a game out of it. I used a bucket to get the water out of the raft and pretended like we were, in danger of drowning. Thankfully, that was not the case. I wasn't stranded out in the Amazon River, because if I had have been, then several days later I would have been in deep trouble because those holes got bigger. I'm sure you saw that coming, right? The holes continued to grow, and the water continued to seep into that raft to where it eventually became no longer usable, and we just had to throw away the raft. Being a Christian in the world is a lot like being a raft in the water. The raft is designed to float on the water. So it touches the water. It is surrounded by the water on all sides. But there should not be any water inside the raft. As Christians in the world, we are out in the world. We are surrounded by the world. But we can't let the world inside us, right? So today what we're going to do is we're going to take some time and we're going to examine ways in which the world may creep into us. Just like with my inflatable raft, that water first just started slowly creeping in and the holes were tiny. We're going to look at ways in which maybe the world is seeping into us just slowly to where we don't even realize it. And maybe, just maybe, we can prevent sinking. Like that inflatable raft sank. That inflatable raft became unusable because it was full of huge holes that could not be repaired and they were letting so much water in them. Let's not become like that with the world, and that's my aim for today, is to look at some of those ways that perhaps the world is creeping into us, and then perhaps more importantly, to look at ways in which we can patch up those holes in our spiritual raft and safeguard ourselves from getting more holes, from making more cracks in our souls that the world can come and infiltrate. So first of all, why does this matter? Why do I not want to be like the world if I'm a Christian? Well, for the answer, I suggest that we turn to the Bible. So let's look together in James 4, verse 4. James chapter 4, verse 4. And there we read, "You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." That's some pretty plain speaking there. If you want to become an enemy of the Lord, there's a pretty clear blueprint here. All you have to do is become a friend of the world to be an enemy of the Lord. I don't know about you, though. I would prefer not to be an enemy of the Lord, so I'm not going to be a friend of the world. Let's look at another passage. 1 John 2:15. 1 John 2:15. And there we read, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." So through this passage, we read that two things cannot coexist: the love of the world and the love of the Father. They cannot cohabitate within me. Only one can. Which one do you want in you? Do you want the love of the world or the love of the Father? For me, I'm going to choose the love of the Father. So I know that that means that I have to kick the world to the curb, but what in the world does that mean? Well, today I'm going to talk about three ways in which the world can creep into us. That first thing that could draw us into the world and make us become like the world and cause detrimental effects to our souls, it's a simple word: stuff. Or maybe if you want to be a little more eloquent, you could say possessions. You know, the world loves stuff, doesn't it? The world loves possessions. If you drive down the road, I'm sure you would see many storage facilities in the city where you live. You know, I did read a recent study that said there are more storage facilities than there are McDonald's, which does not surprise me, even though there are a lot of McDonald's out there. And then within those storage facilities, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of units within those storage facilities. Think about all that stuff. And even if someone doesn't have a storage unit, think about people who you know, maybe even yourself. I'll admit it, our garage is full of stuff. Maybe you also know people who have garages full of stuff, but then attics full of stuff, and then storage sheds full of stuff, and then maybe they have that room that you are not supposed to go into because that is the junk room. You know what I'm talking about. We love stuff. And stuff is not bad. Possessions are not bad. I'm not going to stand here before you today and say that everyone is going to thrive with a minimalist lifestyle to where you only have a mattress and 4 chairs in your home. That's just not realistic for most people. But I do want to point out some of the dangers of our love of possessions. The first danger that we can encounter when we start to love possessions can be discontentment or a lack of contentment. Now think about it. If you have an iPhone and you hear that a new iPhone is coming out, do you maybe research it a little bit? Do you maybe see what features are going to be on that new iPhone? I know I do. Because I'm always thinking, what if there's something better? What if this new iPhone is able to shoot out starbursts into my mouth? I mean, that would be pretty cool, right? We're always hoping that something better can come along. And that's what happens when we put our focus on possessions. Now, that may not seem too dangerous to you, but where it does become a danger is when it bleeds over into our spiritual lives, when it causes us to think, you know what, God, what is better? What do you have that's better for me? Give me better. I'm not content with this. Give me more, Lord. Or maybe we're not content with our worship services. I want more. I want flashier. I want better. You see, a simple thing like being discontent with our possessions can cause a change in attitude that can bleed over into our relationship with the Lord. But you know what else can cause some problems in us? When we love possessions, oftentimes we also will have a love of money. Now we know that money in itself is not evil, but rather the love of money has caused some pretty horrible things to happen. Think to Judas. Think about Judas, the disciple that betrayed our Lord. And what did he do it for? 30 pieces of silver? He must have loved some money in order to do that act for just 30 pieces of silver. I also think of Ananias and Sapphira, and if you will, let's turn to Acts chapter 5 and let's read more about what happened there. What did they do? What kind of love for possessions or money did they have that was ultimately detrimental? Starting in verse 1, we read, "But a man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property, and with his wife's knowledge, he kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only a small part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet." So here we read that Ananias and Sapphira sold what? They sold a piece of property. They sold land. And then what happened? Did they gladly give it all over like they were supposed to, or like they put forth that they were doing? No. Listen here. They only brought a part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. And then in verse 3 we read, "But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land?" So not only did he love this money, that he was going to keep some behind, but we read here that lying took place. He's lying because of his love of money. Verse 4, "While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart?" It's a heart issue. We read a heart issue is going on here. "You have not lied to man, but to God." When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last. And great fear came upon all who heard it. The young men rose and wrapped him up and carried him out and buried him. Verse 7, "After an interval of about 3 hours, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter said to her, 'Tell me whether you sold the land for so much.' And she said, 'Yes, for so much.'" So we see here that her heart obviously has turned as well. Her heart has turned with greed. Her heart has turned so much for the love of money that she's going to lie here. Verse 9, "But Peter said to her, 'How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out.' Immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. When the young men came in, they found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband." And listen to this verse, verse 11. "And great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things." Does great fear come in your heart when you hear that? Do you realize how much our love of possessions and our greed and our love of money can take hold of us and take us down? It should. It should cause fear in your heart. But you know what? Those aren't the only ways in which possessions can cause us to fall down, if you will. But lastly, possessions can cause a great loss of time in our lives. Now, obviously, if you think about a person who wants to buy more and more and more and more stuff, what are they going to have to do to get that? Well, they're going to need money, and so they're going to work. And I do know so many people out there who work to the detriment of their family, to the detriment of their family's relationship and their own relationship to the Lord. But I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on a sneakier way that we can have a loss of time with our possessions. So I want you to take a trip with me, okay? I want you to imagine that you are a stay-at-home mom. You have devoted your life right now, or at least in this season of your life, to raising your children and to being at home with them. And you think, okay, you've got it pretty good. You're not losing time to possessions because you're not working to make money for possessions. But follow me on this little trip to Target, okay? You're going to take a trip to Target. It's kid-free, so woohoo. And you get to Target and you notice a huge clearance section. Everybody loves clearance sections, right? So you stroll over and you see a beautiful lampshade. And that lampshade is an aqua color that would just match your curtains in your living room perfectly. And the best part is you pick it up and you see that it is marked at 35 cents, not $35, 35 cents. So you don't know if it's a mistake or not, but you throw it in your basket and you are excited. Well, you continue to walk around and you see this photo frame that has a cute little saying that says, "But first, coffee." And you love coffee and your husband loves coffee and you think that is going to look so beautiful in our kitchen. We'll put this in like the little nook where our coffee maker goes. So you put that in your cart. And then as you're about to check out, you go to the dollar spot and you see some really cool stickers that have Bible characters on them. And you think, okay, I'm definitely getting these because this will be great for family Bible time. It'll be great for Bible class. Definitely getting these. So you check out And to your surprise, your total is under $5, which is pretty impressive if you go to Target and walk out only having spent under $5. But nonetheless, you are proud of yourself because you're being a good steward of your money. You did not spend that much time in Target, and you're coming home with some pretty good deals. But it doesn't stop there. I want to talk about how even just bringing 3 possessions into our home can be a stealer. It can steal our time away from things that are most important. So you get home from that Target shopping trip and you unload and you're so excited to get that lampshade on the lamp. But when you go, you realize it does not fit. You didn't know that there were different lamp connectors, but apparently there are. And this one does not fit on that lamp base that you thought it would go on that you had. So reluctantly, you log on to Amazon and you look for a lamp base that it will work on. So after spending about an hour, you find the perfect lamp base, and you know it's more time than you probably should have been spending on Amazon, but you know, you have to do what you have to do, so you go ahead and buy that. The box comes in, you unpack the box, you break down the box, and you put it with the recycling to go take out later. You put the lampshade on the lamp base, and you realize that it's one of those lampshades, or lamp bases rather, that takes a really weird shape light bulb. So you have to go to Walmart, then you have to spend some time going to Walmart to find this really weird shape bulb. You finally get it put together, and then you realize that there's no place to actually put the lamp in your living room. So you clear out the clutter in a corner of your living room, and you finally are able to put that lamp there. You're done. That lamp took up a lot of time, didn't it? Now, keep in mind, you do have to dust that lampshade every once in a while. So add on a little more time to that. Now, what about that photo frame with the cute saying that says, "But first coffee"? Well, you get that home and you realize that you wanted to put it in the kitchen after the kitchen has been remodeled. So that's not happening today or tomorrow, or let's be realistic, it's not happening next week either. So you put it in a corner and you see it every once in a while, and you think, you know what, I'm probably never going to get to remodel my kitchen, so let me go ahead and sell this thing. So you get your cell phone, you take a picture of it, you spend time listing it on Facebook Marketplace, you message with several people, finally someone decides to purchase it, and then you all have to decide where you're going to meet. You spend time driving to that meeting place, and finally that picture is out of your life forever. You're done with it. It's taken up some time. What about those stickers that you bought at Target? Well, your kids decided to get into the Target bag, to sneak those stickers out, and to place them all over your glass door that leads to the deck. And apparently they're super duper crazy stickers because you cannot simply just peel them off. You're having to get a scraper out and Goo Gone, and you all are working all afternoon to get those stickers off. Now, is Martha Howell standing here and saying you should never buy a lampshade and you should never buy a decorative photo frame and you should never buy stickers? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, though, is every single time that you bring any possession into your home, you are going to have to understand that that possession will require time out of you. Whether it's from selling it, whether it's from cleaning it, whether it's from fixing it, whether it's moving it around, it will require time from you. And that love of possession, once that adds up, once you go to the dollar store and think it's only $1 and bring home $500 items, you're losing time from your family, you're losing time from your Lord by doing that. The next thing that can sometimes happen in our lives to draw us away from the Lord and into the world is our love of these little magical boxes that we call cell phones. Now, don't get me wrong, I am grateful for cell phones, and especially in this time that we're living in, the quarantine time, to be able to have communication with other people in such a way has helped me personally, and I know it's helped so many others. It's helped connect the church. It's helped us continue Bible studies. It's helped us continue studies like this. I am so grateful for that. But what I am not grateful for is how our cell phones have this horrible ability to replace the Lord. Think of it. When you forget your cell phone at home, do you panic? Do you crave your cell phone? Do you want to be around your cell phone all the time? Do you seek after your cell phone? Those are all things that we should be doing towards the Lord. We should be seeking out the Lord. We should be panicking if we forget to include the Lord in our lives, not our cell phones. Our cell phones have become an idol. They've become a replacement for God to us, which is, the world's okay with that. Are we okay with that? Are we letting that into our lives? Why is it bad? Not only are our cell phones replacing the Lord, but they're doing some pretty awful things in our lives when it comes to how we interact with each other as Christians. Sometimes our usage of cell phones, don't hear me wrong on this, I'm not talking about during our quarantine time. I'm talking about normal times. I'm talking about times that are to come after quarantine is over. But sometimes we allow our ability to use cell phones and our ability to communicate through cell phones to lull us into a feeling of it being okay just to communicate that way. And we think that maybe we don't need to see each other face to face. Maybe we think that if we have the choice of virtual or being in person for worship, that we should always choose virtual because it's the same. Maybe we think that, well, I texted Aunt Mary on her birthday. I don't really need to go see her. Maybe we think that new family who came in and placed membership in our congregation, maybe it's just okay to friend them on Facebook. We don't really need to hang out outside of the assemblies. You know, it's interesting that we actually read something about this in the Bible. I bet you may not have realized that. Now, it's not about cell phone communication, but it is about a preference of face-to-face communication over pen and paper. Let's turn to 2 John. 2 John. And in 2 John verse 12, we read, "Though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face to face so that our joy may be complete." Wow. John here is saying, you know, I could write to you. I could tell you all of this on a piece of paper, but it's not the same. It's not as joyful. It's not as joyous as it would be face to face. You know, not only does it change our desire to be face to face, but our cell phone usage actually changes how we communicate when we are face to face. You know, there was a recent study that said 89% of Americans say that during their last social interaction, face to face, they took out a phone. Let me say that again. Americans say that if they're thinking back to their last face-to-face communication they had, so that means I'm standing in front of you, you're standing in front of me, 89% of them said that they took a phone out during that time. Now, what does that matter? Okay, somebody has a phone out, maybe they were sending a quick text message. Well, let me tell you why that is a problem. When we have our cell phones out, when we even just have them to where we can see them, studies have shown that the quality of our conversations decreases significantly. So does the duration of our conversations. So if we want that with our brothers and sisters or people who we're trying to share the gospel with, then that's okay. So if you want to make sure that your conversations are not deep, your conversations are as short as possible, then go ahead. Take your cell phone out. Just put it to where you can see it. That'll help. But I don't think any of us want that, do we? Studies have also shown that the increase of cell phone usage has made our ability to empathize with other people significantly decreased. It's made us shorten the way we speak, even when cell phones are not out, because we are used to this shorthand way of speaking, not just the acronyms and the BRBs and LOLs, but just in the brevity of conversation, because we're typing things out on Facebook. We have translated that into the way we speak with people one-on-one, and that is detrimental to our relationships with brothers and sisters in Christ, as well as those who we're trying to share the gospel with. Cell phones can be bad news for us. We need to make sure that we're not falling into these traps, and we'll talk about that more in our next lesson. You know, cell phones, one thing that I didn't mention, that cell phones can also be a detriment to us because they are literally changing the way our brains are acting. They're changing the way that our brains are seeking pleasurable moments. Our brains are now trained to, when we scroll through Facebook, we are looking for that next like, or we're looking for that next comment on a picture. And our brains are releasing dopamine that's making us feel good when we get a like. And that's the same thing that our brain releases if we were to do drugs. So because of that, we are stuck in a cycle where we feel good because we see someone liked our post. Now we're going to keep posting more. We're going to scroll more. We're seeking more. We're seeking fulfillment through our cell phones. Cell phones and Facebook usage in particular is also causing us to have a shorter attention span and to not feel satisfied when we're not being entertained and when things aren't constantly changing. And I think you can see how that can translate into how we may feel if we're trying to listen to a lesson that's just 30 minutes long. But we're so used to things ever changing and flashing in front of our faces that it's a chore to actually steady ourselves and to sit and to listen intently to a lesson. So we know that possessions can cause us to fall into many different traps and become like the world, and so can cell phones. My last one that I want to talk about today is our entertainment choices. And I know you may start tuning out right now, but please don't, because this is so important to you, to me, to our children, because the world is going to try to get us any way it can. And a big way is through entertainment. The world loves their entertainment, right? And while not all entertainment is harmful, consuming certain entertainment can really, truly erode the foundations that we've worked so hard to build within our spiritual foundations, our spiritual lives. It can lull us into a sense of security. It can desensitize us. I remember back to the time that I saw The Notebook, the movie The Notebook. And after watching this movie, I looked over at my husband and I said something like, "Oh no, I can't believe that." And he said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, you know, in this movie, there's this woman who is not married to this guy, and then she gets engaged to this other guy, even though she loves the first guy anyway. And I was rooting the whole time for her to have sexual relations with this man who she was not married to. I was cheering that on in the movie because that's what the movie plot wants you to, because they're the ones who are really in love. And then when they finally do have sexual intercourse outside of marriage, everyone is supposed to be happy because that's what the movie wants. And I realized that, and I said to my husband, "Oh, no, I fell into that trap." Because never in a million years outside of a movie would I say, yes, you know, outside of marriage, sexual intercourse is okay. I would never say that. Why am I saying that in a movie? It's because entertainment has this weird way of just lulling us and desensitizing us into thinking things are okay that are not okay. My favorite passage to use when I'm talking about entertainment is, without a doubt, Jeremiah 6. Verse 15. If you will, turn there with me. Jeremiah 6, verse 15. And there we read, "Were they ashamed when they committed abomination. No, they were not at all ashamed. They did not know how to blush. They were not at all ashamed. They did not know how to blush. Does that apply to you when you're watching a movie? Are you ashamed when you see sin on the screen? Do you blush if you see sin up on the screen or hear words that you know are not befitting of Christians? You know, I can think back to when I was a kid and I would be watching TV with my parents and two people would kiss on TV and I would blush. I was embarrassed by that. Do you do that when you're alone and when you see something sinful? Does sin embarrass you? Does sin cause you shame to partake of? Because it's not okay. I know a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't affect me. I can watch it without it affecting me. But that's a lie. That is simply a lie. If you're letting it entertain you, if you're seeking it out for entertainment purposes, then you're saying, I am okay with being entertained by the things that sent my Lord and Savior to the cross. And that's not okay. You know, I have people tell me a lot that sometimes they can hear curse words on movies and, you know, they don't even notice them. And they're kind of proud of that. You know, curse words don't bother me in movies. It's not something to be proud of. It's something that we need to wake up from. When we lose the ability to blush, then we are losing the ability to pinpoint sin. And that carries out over into our lives, not just entertainment-wise, not just movie-wise, but that's going to carry over into all aspects of our spiritual lives. We have to safeguard our minds and our hearts, and not just our children's. I'm not just talking about these are things we need to do for our kids, but I'm talking about as adults as well, as Christians. We're going to talk about how we can do these things more in the next lesson. But for now, I want us to go back to those Bible verses from the beginning of this lesson. If you want to turn in your Bible to James 4, you may do that right now. James 4, verse 4. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Friend of the world equals enemy of God. I don't want to be an enemy of God, do you? I hope you don't, and I hope you'll join me for this next lesson. As we look through these things, we're going to talk about possessions, and we're going to see how we can get out of that trap that the world is trying to bring us in. We can patch up that hole in our raft. We're going to look at cell phone usage, and we're going to talk about how to identify if maybe we are in love with our cell phones more than we love the Lord. We're going to talk about entertainment. We're going to look and examine our choices and see if maybe we're trying to fool ourselves, if maybe the world is grabbing hold of us in a way that it shouldn't. So join me back here for this next lesson, and I pray that we will all together be able to utilize these tools to make sure that we're not letting the world into us. And as we read earlier in this lesson, as it says in 1 John 2:15, that we do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And I want the love of the Father to be in me and in you. So join me as we try to keep the world out of us. In my first lesson, we looked at ways that the world might creep into us as Christians. We looked at ways that we can become separated from the Lord simply by allowing small things like possessions or cell phones or entertainment to come into our hearts. We talked about how we cannot love the world and love the Father and have both of those loves dwell within us. So you might ask, how do I get rid of those loves? If I have fallen into the trap of love of possessions, how do I fix that? How do I fix my obsession with my phone? How do I fix my downfallings with my entertainment choices? That's what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully I can give you some very, very practical tips on how to do those very things. So if you don't have a piece of paper, go ahead and grab one, because I'm going to give a lot of tips, and maybe some will work for you, maybe some won't, but it's not going to hurt to try. So let's first talk about possessions. I'm talking about stuff here. That stuff that litters our homes, that fills our attics. The love of stuff can cause a lack of contentment. The love of stuff can cause an overwhelming desire to acquire money. The love of stuff can cause a loss of time. Sometimes we don't even realize that loss of time. It's not just about us working harder to get more stuff. It's about us bringing more stuff into our homes and then having to take care of all that stuff, having to clean that stuff, having to sacrifice time with our family because we have to organize all that stuff. It's a trap that I don't want to fall into anymore. And maybe you don't want to either, because you realize that the simple act of just being overwhelmed with many, many, many more possessions than we could ever use or ever need can cause a rift in our relationship with the Lord. Let's look in Luke 12. If you will, turn there with me, and let's see what our Lord has to say about storing up our possessions. I think that you will be very familiar with this passage. Luke chapter 12. So let's start in verse 16. And he told a parable, saying, and he being Jesus, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. It's almost like us saying, what should I do? I don't have enough space for all this stuff that I have. It's useful stuff, but I don't have space. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. Sounds pretty reasonable, right? Let's see. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Now, this passage has so many applications, but I want you to think about it in light of your own life, in light of your journey, if you will, with possessions. Do you have so many possessions that you are spending all of your time, instead of enjoying the day, instead of focusing on the Lord, instead of focusing on your family, are you spending your time having to organize your stuff or build up a new storage shed for your stuff because you simply don't have enough room, you don't have enough mental capacity to even take care of it at times, that you have to sacrifice so much time with your loved ones for your possessions, to take care of your stuff? And I know sometimes when I talk about this, people's eyes just glaze over. They think, it's not a big deal. But I'm telling you, it is a big deal. Our stuff can take away important time from the Lord. It can cause us to be discontent with our lives, and it can cause us to have such an overwhelming desire for money in order to either gain more things or organize our things or store our things, that we become separated from the Lord. It may not seem like it, but it definitely can. I found this quote by Joshua Becker, who is a leader in the minimalist movement, but I think it hits the nail on the head here. He said, possessions had become the great distraction in my life. And the most effective way to fully recenter my life on the things that mattered most was to remove the excess possessions from my home and my life. He said, I know what the problem is. The problem is that possessions are a distraction. And he said, I know what the answer is. It's not to go to the Container Store and get some fancy organizational tools. It's to get rid of that stuff. And I suggest to you today that if you have that similar experience where your possessions are starting to become overwhelming to where you find that you're spending so much time cleaning and not enough time living, that it may be time to purge your home of those things that are distracting you. So how do you do it? Lots of different ways, but the way that I do it is I pick a spot in my home, a small spot, not a room, not a couple of rooms. That can be overwhelming, just a small spot to begin with. Let's say that it's a trunk that you have in your living room. What I personally do is I get everything out of the area that I am cleaning or purging. So I would lay everything out of that trunk onto the floor. Then I would pick what I want to keep. Now this is different than picking what I want to get rid of. I'm just picking what I want to keep. That way, it's a little more positive spin in your mindset. It can go a long ways into helping you feel like you're not just completely getting rid of all your life. So pick what you want to keep and put it back. Now, the rest of the stuff is donated or trashed, and that's it. The next day, pick another spot. Work through your house methodically, and you can really accomplish some great things, and you'll also really understand how much stuff you have when you do it like this, because a lot of times we get so overwhelmed and we want to do the whole project all in one day, and it's not. If you want to do a very thorough job, then do a thorough job. Take small bites and really think about what you need in your life. Don't think about what you might need. Don't be like the man in Luke 12. Don't think, well, I'm going to store this up for later, that way I can be happy now. Think about what you need right this second. And, if it's maybe you love playing tennis and you have a tennis match next week, keep those tennis rackets. Don't get rid of those tennis rackets. But maybe you have been keeping a small baggie of googly eyes because you think that someday your kids who are now 25 and 30 will have grandkids who will come over and do a project with you and they'll need googly eyes. I suggest that maybe that's something you don't necessarily need to keep. Maybe if they do someday, you can go to the Dollar Tree and spend $1 and buy those googly eyes. Maybe they won't ever need it, but there's no reason to continually have to handle those googly eyes and store those googly eyes and take up mental space in your house with those googly eyes for a just in case time. So after you're finished purging, you're going to also want to change your habits. Because we didn't all come to accumulate stuff just by accident, did we? Most of us have become accustomed to just buying, especially if we find a good deal, we're going to buy. So to break this habit, I suggest that maybe you try a spending fast. Pick a couple of weeks and decide with your husband that during these 2 weeks, we are only going to purchase food, diapers, medicine, and gas. Nothing else. See how that feels for those 2 weeks. It might be easy, but it might be really hard. And if it's hard, you may want to extend it. You may want to keep going to try to retrain your brain. Try to keep it from just buying stuff to fill a void in your life when the Lord is the one that needs to fill that void in your life. You can also, as an alternative to this method, you can do a practice of delayed gratification. Simply speaking, when you decide that you want to buy something, you see something you want, take a journal with you everywhere you go or use your cell phone and write down that item. And tell yourself, I'm going to look back in a month over everything that I've written. And if I still need something on this list, I will purchase it then. But I'm not going to make purchases just to get instant gratification anymore. I'm not going to make purchases just because they make me feel good anymore. I'm going to turn to the Lord for that. It can be an eye-opener when you go through that list and you see, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I wanted. But you know what? I didn't die not buying those things. I'm still alive. I still made it. I can do this. That practice can also help with contentment. And we read in 1 Timothy 6 that there is great gain in godliness with contentment. So what a joy it is to be able to find contentment again, even when we were once buried in possessions. Now, as you continue your journey to be free from the burden of possessions, it might help you to keep a few boxes around your house. They can be pretty boxes, decorative boxes that are your donate boxes. And this is after you've already purged everything, but you're just living your life. And maybe you realize that Susie is never going to wear this shirt again, and you can just drop it in that donate box. It's an easy way to avoid putting off something, because a lot of times don't we say, well, when I get around to donating stuff, I'll get that. But then we forget about it, don't we? So this way you are accumulating stuff all throughout your life that you need to donate, and you aren't putting it off. We have one in our laundry room area and then one in our bedroom. That way, clothes tend to be the ththings that get donated the most at our house because there are so many of us. We're going through so many clothes, but it's easy to do. It's accessible for me. It takes away one of the excuses that I could possibly have. Next, help others to not fall into that trap that possessions can have over our lives. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, first of all, stop giving people your junk. I know, it's hard, especially when you are purging. Maybe you find 10 trash bags of newborn clothes, and Sister Sue just had a baby, and wouldn't it be a great blessing to her to have those newborn clothes? And so you tell her, hey, Sister Sue, I'm bringing you over some newborn clothes. Now, what is she going to say? She's not going to say, no, thank you. She might, but most of us are so polite, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, especially if you live in the South. So instead, I want you to think about what's going to happen to Susie when you give her those 10 bags of newborn clothes. She's going to have to take time out from her newborn to look through every single one of those bags and decide what she needs and what she doesn't need. And if she's already set on those newborn clothes, maybe she feels bad about just giving them all away. So she's going to go through them anyway to see perchance maybe there's something she needs. And you've just created a big burden for her, even though you were trying to be a blessing. So if you have something that you think someone else needs, ask them if they want it, but ask it in a way that they can refuse it without feeling like they're being mean or hurting your feelings. So, you could have said, hey, Sister Susie, I have a ton of newborn clothes. My feelings will not be hurt if you say no, but I wanted to check with you first before I donate these clothes. It can be a good way to make sure that we're not just dumping our burdens onto other people. Also, when we're trying to help others not become burdened by possessions, we need to make sure when we're giving gifts that we are not just giving junk or stuff for the sake of giving stuff. A lot of times doesn't that happen? Gifts become obligatory. We feel like we have to give certain gifts at certain times to certain people, and so we just pick whatever, that candle looks good. And then that person has to figure out what to do with a candle that they didn't really want or need. So instead, try giving experiences, try giving services, try giving trips to the movie. You can give movie tickets. Try giving a young couple an afternoon of your babysitting services, or a little girl your cooking lesson, or a teacher an afternoon where you're going to come in and help her class so she can get caught up on grades. There are so many things that you can give of yourself without having to burden others with possessions. Lastly, to help us make sure that we are out of this trap of possessions that can cause us to wander away from the Lord because it's stealing our time, think about making a radical lifestyle change. How much can you live without? Do you really need the big house that you live in right now? What if you had a smaller house? Would that mean that your husband could work less? Would that mean that you could work less? Would that mean that you would spend less time cleaning and more time with your kids or your grandkids or in Bible study? These are some hard questions to think about, and I'm not suggesting in any way that you all need to go out and put your homes up for sale. But I do want to leave you with this final thought before we move on to cell phones. It's a parable that I first saw on the wall of the restaurant, Jimmy John's. And it goes like this. An American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat were several large fin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, "Only a little while." The American then asked, "Why didn't you stay out longer and catch more fish?" The Mexican said he had enough to support his family's immediate needs, so he didn't really need to stay out any longer. The American then asked, "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" The Mexican fisherman said, "Well, I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take siesta with my wife, Maria, stroll into the village each evening where I play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life." The American scoffed. "I am a Harvard MBA and I could help you. You should spend more time fishing and with the proceeds, buy a bigger boat. And with those proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you would have a fleet of fishing boats. And instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you could sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. You would control the product, processing, and distribution. You would need to leave the small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, then LA, and then eventually New York City, where we will run your expanding enterprise." The Mexican fisherman asked, "But how long will this take?" To which the American replied, 15 to 20 years. The Mexican fisherman said, "But then what?" The American laughed and said, "This is the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO and sell your company's stock to the public and become very rich, and you would make millions." "Millions?" asked the fisherman. "Then what?" The American said, "Then you would retire, move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siesta with your wife, stroll to the village in the evening, and play your guitar with amigos." You see, sometimes we are so busy chasing what we think we want, the possessions that we think we want, that we don't stop to think, we could have that life right now. We could have a life where we spend half of our day in Bible study. We could have a life where we are not neglecting our personal relationships with other members of the Lord's church. We could a lot of times have that life. Now, by no means am I saying you need to go out there and quit your job if you are working to support your family right now, but I am saying let's take stock at what we are working towards. Are we working towards more possessions, or are we working towards that ultimate goal of heaven and enjoying this life that God has given us while we are working towards heaven and teaching others and helping them to reach heaven as well? So the next thing that I talked about in our previous lesson that could perhaps cause us to wander away from God without us even realizing it is our use of cell phones. Now, a lot of us may say, of course, I use my cell phone a lot, I understand, but it's just a necessary evil in life. That may be, but I want to suggest to you that many of you out there may be addicted to your cell phone, may be replacing the Lord with your cell phone without even fully realizing it. So I want us together to think about some of these questions to see if that is perhaps the case. So either on a piece of paper or just in your mind, keep track of how many times you answer yes to these questions. Are there days when the basics of home are missing some components, like hot meals, clean clothes, or clean forks even? But the Facebook posts have all been read and you've caught up on Instagram notifications. Do you prefer to have your phone with you at the dinner table? Has your spouse or child ever mentioned to you that he wishes you would not be on your phone while with him? Do you feel anxious if you leave your phone at home while running an errand? Do you keep surfing or communicating online at night after your spouse goes to sleep? Do you routinely look at your phone while rocking your baby or watching a movie or watching a ball game with your children or family? Do you spend 5 or more hours a day on your phone? If you answered yes to any of those questions, I'm not going to sit here and say I have diagnosed you with an addiction to your cell phone, but I am going to say that perhaps you need to wake up a little bit more and to be more deliberate about what you're allowing your cell phones to do in your life. The very first thing I would do if I were you to make sure that the world is not creeping into your heart through your cell phone is to take a look at your statistics. If you have an iPhone, you can go and you can look and see how much time you spend a day on your cell phone. You can see what apps you're using most. Take a reality check here. If it's 5 hours a day, then multiply that out by 7 days to see how many hours you're spending a week. That's 35 hours a week. Is it worth it? You know, a lot of us, especially during this quarantine time, may be spending even more time because we want to feel connected. But don't forget there are other ways to connect. There are other things that need to be done in our lives besides looking at a cell phone. So one way that I have personally tried to cut down my cell phone usage to keep it from making me become separate from the Lord is setting goals. I have set certain goals for, I want my weekly average to be at this. I don't want to use my phone any more than this a day. I also put my phone on do not disturb mode during certain set times of every single day. This helps you to not hear that constant ding of notifications. If you're like me, you get text messages a lot, and it's a great way to communicate, but it also can distract you from your children, from your work, from so many things that you become a slave to that phone. You can also set limits on certain apps. For a while, I had a Facebook app limit for 30 minutes a day, and I found out very quickly that I was exceeding that limit. I eventually deleted Facebook off of my phone so that I wouldn't continue to have that temptation before me. You can also mute certain text threads. So you may be asking why I would want to do this. Well, if you are a part of any sort of texting group, you may have some friends who are in a group together and you text each other throughout the day, just pieces of advice or encouragement and things that you really want to know, but you can't be a slave to hearing those notifications all throughout the day. On an iPhone, at least, you can go and you can click on that group and you can slide to do not disturb or silent mode. So that way you can pick up your phone whenever you want to and see what's going on, see what people are texting, and you can respond, but you're not hearing those notifications ever. That might be an option for you. It might even be an option with certain people. Maybe sister so-and-so texts you all the time and you still want to respond to her. So you don't want to delete her or block her. So you can just mute her for a little while. That way you're not hearing her notifications and you can still be responsive when it is time to be responsive and not when you're supposed to be doing other things. You can choose to delete and reinstall apps intentionally. I mentioned that I deleted my Facebook app. Now, sometimes I want to see what's going on Facebook, or I want to post something for sale in Facebook Marketplace, so I just reinstall it. But after every time that I use Facebook, I press the delete button. And what that helps me to not do is to mindlessly scroll. And we talked about in the previous lesson how mindlessly scrolling through Facebook is changing the way our brains are working. And it's causing us to not be able to focus as much. And that bleeds over into our spiritual lives. And I don't want that for myself. And I'm sure you don't want that for yourself either. So think about those apps that maybe you're spending too much of your time on. And consider deleting them after every time you use them. And that way, if you do want to use them, you are being intentional about that. Something else you can do to lower your phone usage is to actually turn your phone to grayscale, meaning to black and white instead of color. Scientists have found that colors excite and entice our brains and keep us on the phone longer. So there are settings within your phones that you can go to and you can turn your display to black and white. Perhaps most importantly, though, is after you have this plan to stop your cell phone from running and ruining your life, replace your cell phone habit with good. If you turn to Acts 9:36 through 42, we read there about a woman named Dorcas or Tabitha. We read that she did many good things and many acts of kindness. And at the end of verse 39, we read that the women who were standing around crying were showing the clothes that she had made while she was with them. I imagine that this is just one of those women who's always got a project going on to serve other people. Let's strive to be like that. Let's replace an hour of our cell phone usage with an hour of serving others. But the important part is to have a plan for that. It's not just going to spontaneously happen. Maybe you're great at writing letters. Keep a stack of cards out on the table for the next few weeks so you can get into a habit of, instead of picking up your phone, picking up a pen and writing a letter. Maybe you like to crochet. Keep that handy. Come up with some way that you can serve others instead of serving yourself poorly by using your cell phone. The last thing that I wanted to discuss today, the way that the world can come into us and separate us from the Lord, is through our entertainment choices. Again, we need to wake up. We need to figure out, are we truly blushing when we see entertainment material that is not suitable for Christians? And obviously, we need to make sure that our children are not seeing this, but I'm mainly speaking with adults right now, with you ladies out there who are watching this, because a lot of times it's us adults who fool ourselves into thinking that we can handle it, that it doesn't affect us, but it does affect us. And one of the greatest ways I think that we can see how it's truly affecting us or how desensitized that we have become is to take an entertainment fast. Take a couple of weeks and don't turn on the TV. Then when you do turn the TV on back to the programs that you were watching, I guarantee you will be shocked at what you had been okay with. You will start hearing those words that you had previously become desensitized to. That's a wake-up call, sisters, and I hope that you will make a decision then and there of what your limits are. How much profanity are you okay with? How much nudity are you okay with? How much adultery are you okay with? How much blasphemy are you okay with? Saying those things out loud almost sounds silly because as Christians we should say none. I'm not okay with any of it. So if that's true and you're not okay with any of that in your entertainment choices, make that decision today. Tell your spouse, write it down, tell your children, apologize to them for not being consistent in the past. Tell them that it is a new day and that you're going to do better and you're going to help them do better and you're going to help your husband do better. Make a plan and stick with it. Now, there are lots of ways that we can carry through with this plan, but I think first and foremost, let's remember why we're doing this plan. Why am I cleaning up my entertainment choices? Why do I want to be purer in heart? Well, first of all, we want to be pure because we want to be more like the Lord. Secondly, we don't want to be entertained by things that sent the Lord to the cross. To remember this why, to remember our reasoning, maybe you want to cross-stitch a phrase like pure in heart and hang it above your TV. Maybe you have a Cricut machine and you can cut out some vinyl, some pretty design that says purer in heart, or may I refuse to be entertained by things that sent my Lord to the cross, something like that. And you can hang it near the TV and it can be your motto for entertainment. And it can help you remember the why you're doing this. So how do you do it? You've got the why, you've got the desire. One of the early ways that my husband and I started to change our entertainment habits was to put password protection on our TV. And what this would do, it wouldn't allow us to watch anything above PG unless we had this passcode. Now, okay, you're thinking, well, if you have the passcode, what's the big deal? You could just enter it in. No. You see, the passcode was 4 digits. I only had 2 of those digits, and my husband had the other 2. So that means that we had to be together, and we had to both decide that it was okay to watch something. I would enter in the first two numbers, I would pass the remote to him, and he would enter in the second two numbers. This was a great way to hold us accountable in those early days where we were still getting used to how to navigate entertainment choices with this new conviction that we had. Because it is kind of embarrassing if you decide you wanted to watch The Real Housewives of Orange County and to ask your husband, hey, honey, I need the password so I can watch The Real Housewives of Orange County. Hopefully you're married to someone who would check you on that, and you could together talk about why and maybe how something might not be an appropriate choice. Of course, you can always put filters on your network to keep things out for yourself and for your children. In our home, we still use VidAngel all the time, VidAngel, VidAngel. And with that, we are able to filter movies and TV shows that we still are mostly good. You know, we're not going to choose filth to watch and then filter out all the bad words and nudity and all that stuff. We're still going to choose mostly good entertainment that's good without the filters. But then when you add those filters on top of it, that filters out any blasphemy or any profane words, then it becomes completely clean for us to watch. And we do that even with some Disney movies, some PG rated movies, because the truth be told, a lot of PG movies even have things in them that should offend Christians if we're honest. Another thing that we utilize in our family is pluggedin.com or commonsensemedia.com. And these two websites simply allow you to see if there's any questionable material in the movie that you're about to go see. Really, there's no reason why a Christian should be caught off guard in a movie theater by some questionable content, because you can simply log on to pluggedin.com or commonsensemedia.com and you can see what's going to be in a movie. You can see if there's going to be curse words or nudity or violence. And then you can make your decision based on that information. Remember that entertainment is a choice. It's a choice, not a right. It's a privilege, not something that we have to have. If you had tried all of these suggestions and you still cannot manage to get rid of those bad entertainment habits, throw your TV out. Wouldn't it be better to live without a TV than it would be to meet your end and not get to go to heaven? Lastly, I want to suggest to you that another way that you can help yourself to get in that right mindset to tame your possession habit and your cell phone habits and your entertainment habits is to reframe the way you speak about them. For example, I want you to try to think of saying I don't instead of I can't. So let's say you're talking to a friend and you say, I can't see any movies that are rated PG-13 and up. Well, that sounds almost silly, doesn't it? It sounds almost like you have been given a restriction that is just very oppressive. Instead, try to frame it like this to yourself and to others. I don't watch movies that are rated PG-13 and up. Then it becomes a declarative statement about yourself. Then it becomes part of your identity. Maybe that statement would be, I don't check my phone more than once an hour, instead of I can't check my phone more than once an hour. It may seem very minuscule to you, but scientists did a study where they had two groups of women, and they told both groups that they had a goal for them to go to the gym every single day for 30 days. But one group of women, they told that group to say, I can't miss a workout. So every morning they told themselves, I can't miss a workout, I can't miss a workout. However, this other group, the scientists told them to say, I don't miss workouts. I don't miss workouts. I don't miss workouts. The results were astonishing. The group that told themselves, I don't miss workouts, 80% of them successfully completed the goal. 80% of them went to the gym every day for 30 days. The group that said, I can't miss a workout, only 10% of them completed the goal of going to the gym every day. You see, how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to others even can greatly influence our mindset. And we need to take advantage of whatever we can do to change our mindsets when it comes to these things that want to pull us away from the Lord. Lastly, again, I leave you with the same scripture that I came to you with earlier and the same scripture that I left you with for my first lesson, but I think it's so important that we hear it again. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. It's impossible, friends, to have the love of the world and the love of the Father in you. Please choose to do whatever you can to safeguard yourself and your family from these pitfalls that may seem so insignificant, but that can truly separate us from the Lord.